Hello and welcome to episode number 26 of In Pursuit of Clarity, entitled Constructive Bullying, Our Cultural Immune System. This episode is going to be a bit of a digression from the norm to talk about a timely topic that I feel warrants discussion. Because I'm so invested in preventing what I can't help but see as a cultural downward spiral into chaos and confusion and degeneracy, I force myself to take in what tens of millions of others take in so that I don't lose touch with the general zeitgeist, and that large number of people who actually consume this stuff on a regular basis. I don't mean this in an angry or petty way, but I see them as something akin to drug addicts, ingesting poisons just as dangerous as any street drug, with ramifications they neither understand nor seem to even care to understand anymore. Quite a while back, I fell down something of an online rabbit hole and stumbled upon a content creator of sorts that I feel epitomizes a type of personality being pushed on us so aggressively. What's fascinating about this is that she was almost completely unknown at the time, and yet somehow I knew, and this isn't an exaggeration, I felt certainty here, that she would rocket to stardom and become extremely famous and influential. I remember stopping to analyze the why behind it. What was it about her content that caused me to be so certain about her future? And fairly quickly, a profound realization hit me, and hasn't left me since. There was one trait she had that I'd seen in nearly every other personality of a similar type that seemed to explode into the limelight at such an unnatural pace. I'm not trying to be wantonly cruel here, and in fact I'm trying very hard not to be, so please don't misunderstand me. But it certainly wasn't talent, or wit, or physical attractiveness, or some mysterious and undefinable quality, or any of those things that traditionally, in other ages, seem to help create superstars and influential personalities. It was this, a brazen and arrogant shamelessness, a confidence seemingly without any justification, so extreme that it couldn't help but make healthier onlookers feel uneasy and disturbed. If you stop for a moment and consider those with the easiest path to celebrity over the recent decades, you'll see this trait in a great many of them. The attitude of rebellion against a natural order. A purposefully ugly, sneering, barely restrained hate directed at a certain type of people or ideology or mindset, and an almost unhinged glorification of self and ego, and specifically the type of self completely detached from the divine, or anything sacred or of depth or worth, but rather making use of a hodgepodge of superficial tripe to fill that void, and then mistaking this for self. The specific girl I'm referring to here has a late-night talk show now, because of course she does, and she's easy to find, though I won't mention her by name. And this video isn't really about her specifically, or the rest of those that celebrate and assist in the destruction of every aspect of traditional Western civilization, and do so with such glee. I wanted to discuss what I feel is our popular culture's immune system, our modern mechanism of ensuring we don't go too far off the rails too quickly. So as I mentioned, I forced myself to digest several elements of popular culture that in any other circumstances I might otherwise work my damnedest to avoid. If I didn't feel like there was work to be done of the most important sort, I'm not certain I wouldn't be living in a cave somewhere, entirely off the radar, happily ignorant to all this bad air. But not all of the popular culture I digest is of the deeply negative sort, and this is the topic of this cast. As we descend further into weakness and madness in the West, two terms I've come to believe are practically synonyms, and illustrate just how much extreme comfort and decadence can rot the brain, we've developed an allergy to those types of corrective nudges we've always engaged in as a society to keep this train on track, or at least keep it from crashing into an explosive fireball. Increasingly, we now call these corrective nudges bullying. To be clear, there is a deeply negative form of bullying, namely the type of person who picks on the weak because they're weak and because it makes him feel good in a purely egotistical sense to assert his dominance. Those who engage in this sort of bullying are usually the insecure and intellectually immature type, and their behavior is a net negative. However, as our increasingly sick culture sprints headlong down the path of language pollution, so often lumping two different concepts together under a single word umbrella, it's important to remind that there's a type of bullying that's very much a net positive. Picture that type of bully on the playground who, in a lighthearted way, takes some witty shots at one of his peers with regards to some deeply aberrant behavior that's causing him to be disliked by others, and possibly putting him at risk of ostracization or a brawl. Behavior that, if corrected, might cause others to view him as a healthier and more well-adjusted person, worthy of friendship, and thus improve his own life, and even, slightly, the lives of those around him. Most of us, prior to this youngest upcoming generation, both experienced this and dished it out in greater or lesser degrees. It was a regulatory force, sometimes negative, sometimes positive, but in the latter case, serving a very real and legitimately helpful role, keeping us from becoming the worst possible caricature of what a human being might be, without any standards or guidelines of human behavior. It's an extremely unpopular view in our age, but I'd contend this net positive type of corrective behavior, call it bullying if you must, was not only an absolute necessity for a healthy society, but is also deeply natural. Left to their own devices, children will always engage in it to some extent. The less healthy among them may often fall into the net negative bullying tactics, but those from more stable and well-adjusted environments were capable of the more positive sort, and thus played an objectively healthy role, broadly speaking. Some of those engaged in this net positive corrective behavior have managed to earn and maintain some influence and reach online, though certain forces are working overtime to squelch and destroy them by any means necessary. I certainly don't see eye to eye with all of them, and some of their content might not be perfectly suited to my own tastes, but I greatly appreciate that they exist, and that they're doing what they do. The biggest example of this, and someone whose reach and influence rivals any public figure in the world right now, is PewDiePie. He may often focus on things rightly considered silly or superficial, but this is almost a moot point. He reaches tens of millions, and merely by communicating his own thoughts and opinions on popular culture or memes, he's essentially filtering the world through the frame of a reasonably well-raised white male Swede for his viewers, and having a significant shaping effect on how they see the world. He's even spoken highly of the Japanese writer Mishima, and retracted a donation to SPLC with some careful, critical words about their organization. Because of all of this, he's considered such a significant threat that several organizations have mobilized time and energy to remove his voice from the marketplace of ideas. But there are several more such creators. iDubbz, who apparently was the first victim of YouTube's new guidelines imposed a few days ago, could fall into this category. Mr. Metokur is a great example. Even those like Drew Gooden or Danny Gonzalez. What they do is simple, and much of it could be classified as a light-hearted mocking of what they consider to be unhealthy or insane, and yet it fulfills a very real purpose, and plays a role that needs to be played. If we'd like to avoid becoming a society in which half of us dress up as furries, and or justify sex with children or animals, and destroy those who stand up against these things, as kinkophobic, for example. If you think I'm going too far here, please realize we've had an uninterrupted stretch of a decade or two of claims of "that'll never happen," followed by exactly that happening. There are no brakes on the culture-destroying train set in motion by those profoundly sick minds from the Frankfurt School diaspora and their associates. Millions of useful idiots have been so deeply indoctrinated with the idea that it's heroic to fight against standards, against decency or virtue, against the ideas of merit and hierarchy, that this is a civil rights struggle, pitting the child-molesting furry or the pink-haired Antifa fighter on par with Martin Luther King in their own minds. And there's no point in which they'd attain their aims and be satisfied accordingly. There's no clear end result goal. They've only been taught to fight and struggle indefinitely. The resentment-fueled minds behind their philosophy have wound them up, and now gleefully watch them go, like some mindless zombie army. In any fight, or debate, or struggle, if one side is allowed to act freely and the other is prevented from fighting at all, the results are inevitable, and this is obvious when we really stop to think about it. A reactive force is needed. Without checks and balances, our world immediately becomes Sodom and Gomorrah, and sinks to the level of the lowest common denominator. This is simply a guarantee, and history teaches us this with stark clarity. So apparently, PewDiePie announced in his latest video that he's become a bit tired. Exasperated might be the better word. And in the segment I just watched, he seemed to echo much of what I've written here, about the need of some type of constructive critical feedback to prevent us from stumbling into a global madhouse. He also mentioned taking a break starting next year, and it was obvious the blame for this lies with YouTube. If we think the mainstream of popular culture is bad now, just imagine what it might become after a decade or two without any of the type of constructive bullying mentioned here. A future in which every mental disorder is not only allowed free rein, but encouraged, celebrated, with their anger and resentment and pride and confidence further stoked by the largest corporations and platforms in the world. And that's all I really wanted to say. Next time you hear someone speaking up against bullying and throwing both types of behavior I've just outlined under a single word umbrella, consider the intellectual dishonesty at play here, whether conscious or unconscious. And remember this: if these types of personalities aren't allowed to play their corrective role and help slightly nudge popular culture back to some semblance of sanity, corrective forces far more angry and destructive will rise up in their place. If anyone involved in these censorship decisions happens to be listening to this at any time now or in the future, you'll want to avoid this path. Trust me. Accept the gentle nudges, or someday receive a hammer blow, and the likelihood of immense violence and chaos. This certainly isn't a threat, just something of an exasperated promise, based on my own historical context and understanding of human nature. Please don't make this inevitable, and realize that you don't have the right to forcibly reshape our culture in your image, and that there are consequences to such overreach. Thanks for listening.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only